Perfect. Looks like we got a few people joining here.
Great.
Just to kick things off while people are joining, I'm curious where you're joining from because we have all the ends of the spectrum here. We have here, for example, me who's in the Netherlands, in Europe. So it's going to be the evening for me, the afternoon, as well as the, the West Coast in the morning.
East Coast for me.
And I'm joining from, I'll call it sunny Portland. It's 8 a.m. morning, my time.
Nice. Thanks for joining us this morning. Just to kick things off here while we're going through, today is really about being able to look at the organization and the contribution that your support team makes to the organization's goals and outcomes, and really working towards being able to measure the success of your support and really connect it to the larger business outcomes of where people are contributing to that, and how you can start to make a strategic impact. What we're looking to do is really give you at least one thing, if nothing else, one thing to be able to take away from today, to be able to start measuring within your support organization and embody within your teams to start driving that muscle and to be able to connect those to larger outcomes within the organization and become the strategic partner within support, and also be able to provide value of how your teams can contribute to that as individuals and the activities that they're doing, even down to their interactions with customers as well. I myself, Neil, I'm the host of Growth Support. We started back in September to really be able to give people the tools and resources they need to succeed within support and be able to facilitate that process. And Tom came to me with this idea to have this conversation live and to be able to facilitate that and help everyone to be able to get the information that they can be successful. So I will have Emre and Tom introduce themselves. Why don't we kick things off the West Coast, Emre? Can you tell the audience about yourself and where you're from and what you're doing?
Yes, my name is Emre Tekoglu. I've been in the support space for the 20 years, worked for large corporations like SunGard and Salesforce. Now I'm the VP of Customer Support at Sweeny. We do SaaS for InsurTech, and my teams handle cases from different channels like phone, email, chat. And we take pride in customer support. We always talk about how we could elevate support to the big tables, because we truly believe we can be the voice of the customers, where we have the most interactions of any other department with customers. And I always take my teams accountable for knowing that we have that power. And now today, hopefully we could talk about, like, with that power comes great responsibility, and some of the responsibilities are only possible if you measure the right metrics. So Tom, maybe that's how I could pass it over to you.
Sure. Hey, I'm Tom Sweeny. I'm the founder and CEO of ServiceXRG. We've been around studying the support and success industry and the broader technology services industry for 20 years. Before that, I did have a real job working for Gartner, and then before that, actually, started a long time ago, and I don't really want to tell you how many years, but actually picking up the phone and doing tech support for a long time. So I have been immersed in support and customer services for my entire career. And one of the reasons I think this conversation today is important is because we, as an industry, need to be able to say to the greater corporation, we matter, we value. We're not just a cost center, we're not just an expense, but we contribute great value to the organization. But now we need to figure out how to quantify that and measure that and then promote it. So let's get it done, or at least start the conversation. Neil, sounds like you're on mute.
It is. Indeed, this is we do it live. I was indeed on mute. I was going to say, to kick things off and start the conversation there, question to start it, and maybe for the audience as well. For the audience, how are you measuring how your support organization connects to the business goals, and how are you doing that now? And for Emre and Tom, just to start the discussion, question for you: what is service contribution and why is it important?
Audience first, or do you want us to talk about it?
We can see as the comments roll in, and if you want to start the discussion and go from there. Tom, what is service contribution to you?
Well, all right. Well, I was actually, so we've been doing a body of research trying to answer this. What are the things that companies are measured, support and service teams are measured against? And it probably isn't any surprise that it is typically satisfaction, speed, and performance of delivering answers to customers, those types of activities. But here's an interesting twist, or at least a twist I want to throw out there. If we take that one step higher and we look at what the business is trying to accomplish, retaining existing customers, driving satisfaction and brand affinity, growing relationship value, continuing to be innovative in our products so we can maintain market share, and being efficient in all that stuff. Those are, lofty goals that are more corporate wide, but they belong in the service teams as well. The service teams have a stake in actually contributing to that. So I'd like to leave it at that, at least from my perspective. That's the broader goal. The next step is, though, how do we connect the activities of the support team and the service teams to that? But those are the top level goals.
Yeah, let me chime in. And for, we want to keep this as a dialogue and help and get engagement, because there's so much content out there. And on this topic too, like if you Google what are the metrics you should measure, like it's very confusing. There's so many of them. And each department and each company will have their own style on approach, because your product, your customers are different. Therefore, you should customize it. But at the core, one of the key metrics that every support organization does measure is CSAT, customer satisfaction. And there's a lot of debate about it, effectiveness of it. For example, in B2B, if you are lucky, and how you measure is, I see two problems. And I will say, guilty as charged, I measure it, correct? So that's one of the metrics I measure, because we want to ask our customers their opinion. But it fails on two ends. One, how many customers take that survey at the end of support interaction? In B2B, that number for us is 5%, which might be even considered high for some organizations. Some measure only 1 or 2. So as a leader, are you really doing yourself a favor by measuring the outliers, the 5%, the 1%? Because guess when customers take that survey? When they're extremely upset or when they're extremely happy, which are two extreme ends. Second, where it falls short is you take the survey at the end of the interactions. Like when your case is done, you close it, you send them a survey, but that's after the fact. You want to interact with the customers at the time of when it's off the tracks. So this is where I talked to Tom before about it. Like this is where service contribution could come into play. And Tom, what do you think about that CSAT dilemma that I just described as guilty as charged? I use it. It's important. We should still have it, ask customers' opinion, but it falls short on those ends.
Yeah. So it's ubiquitous. Everybody needs to measure some form of customer sentiment, whether it's CSAT, effort score, NPS, whatever your measure of choice is. We have to do that. But how does it connect back to, a satisfied customer? They are satisfied with the transaction. Well, what about the account? Is the account at risk? Is the account healthy? Well, do satisfied customers churn? There's so much that we don't know about the customers we serve. And NPS, CSAT gives us only a glimpse. So where's the correlation between how much effort we invest to satisfy that, the customer base, and the return that we get in terms of retention, expansion, recommendations? So I don't mean to be down on NPS and CSAT. I think it's fundamental. But I guess what I'm suggesting is I don't think it's enough.
So just want to chime in on this real. So what we are doing as an organization at Cyber, so real business practical tips, because I want to share those with the folks too. We are now leveraging the large language models and generative AI, whether AI, whatever you want to call that. We are now leveraging that type of technology. And now the question is, what are the prompts we should be feeding? Because like, as a human, you could pull up any support case or ticket, however you call it. And you could go over the interaction line by line between customer and the support rep. And if you have done this role for some time, you could assess how well that transaction was. So my take on it is, if you can do it as a human, you are going through certain analytical questions. For example, did we respond? The first response, was it meaningful? Was it good? Did we ask the right probing questions? Did we solve this case actually? Did we give the customers the shortest path to success? Did we educate the customer? So those are the questions that goes through your head as you are assessing. Well, all those questions are technically prompts into generative AI. Now with there are many solutions, not many solutions, there's new solutions coming on the market now that does that now. With your domain knowledge, you could feed those prompts, and now you could technically measure 100% of your case interactions based on your business needs, based on your questions successfully now. So I wanted to share that with the folks who listen, like, okay, what's next? This sounds good, but that's one of the quick action items in terms of what's next.
And Emre, I think that the use of a language model, AI, to actually analyze interactions with customers gives us that opportunity to peer into the next layer. Knowing whether a customer is satisfied with a transaction is terrific, but what was the nature of that interaction? Why did they have to call? Why did or contact your team? There's a lurking problem that other customers aren't calling you about. If I think about one of the primary benefits that a support team can deliver in terms of value, it's removing obstacles to customers' ability to be successful. But that word success, satisfied isn't success. What success is, it means that a customer derives value from using your product, and we need to make sure that more customers are successful. And understanding the nature of why people have a need to contact us is going to tell us how we can be more effective and impactful.
I also talk to my teams about measuring the outcome of case resolution sometimes can lead to unintended wrong reasons. Because I also talk about case deflection, and because you want to prevent the cases. And let me tie those two statements. If I'm a customer, and we are customers to many different, we use software, we use other vendors, what's the best support interaction is what I ask. And the best support interaction is the one that doesn't have to happen. The one where I don't need to pick up the phone and call. But often in support, we don't measure that. We don't measure how many cases we have deflected. So I tell my team, look, we are not going to measure average handle time. We look at it for different reasons, but if you need to stay on the phone or on the chat for 5 more minutes to prevent the next case, do that, because that's important. And what's your take on that, where sometimes measuring wrong things could lead to wrong behaviors, like, hey, let me get off the phone. So what if the customer calls again, and instead of Emre, they're going to get Tom, and Tom's numbers are going to go up because Tom solved the case, Emre solved the case. So we solved 2 cases that we should have handled under the 1 case, and because we don't measure that properly.
Right. And what if both you and I were really polite and we provided great service, and that customer gave us high scores on our NPS or CSAT transactional survey, yet they went away and they said, well, damn, I can't figure out how to use this product. I think I'm going to go use this other one.
Yeah.
So,
there you go.
you know,
I think this prompts an interesting question, because in my view, many metrics are what you measure is what you're going to get. So if you're really focusing on certain metrics and you have reps do that, it's going to create those behaviors that Emre is talking about and being able to do that. I think the question that it raises are what are some of those challenges that companies face when it comes to connecting those teams to the larger outcomes that you want to achieve, and what are some of those challenges that people face, and how can they overcome them?
Yeah, so this goes to great examples many people use when at NASA, when they ask the person who was sweeping the floors, what's your purpose? It's putting a man on the moon, correct? So in customer support, if you ask people, what's your purpose? We need to have a solid, rock solid answer. We need to put people on the moon. So at high level, we need to tie, in my opinion, customer support success to customer success.
You bet.
So that, to me, that's the answer our support reps needs to get. Not solving a case, not getting a 5 on the CSAT.
But and that rule right there, you know, this notion that when customers are successful, the business is successful, you know, needs to permeate the entire post-sales culture, whether it's a success team or, you know, occurs at onboarding or at some adoption stage or a technical resolution of an issue. So now we're kind of getting to this higher notion that we need to make our customers successful, and we can't just use that term and use satisfaction or NPS as a synonym for success. We actually truly need to understand what success means from the customer's perspective. And, you know, they want to, you know, be able to use the products that we provide to them, and they want to do it quickly. They want to realize value. They don't want to have to pick up the phone or send an email or chat or, you know, whatever it is. They don't want to necessarily need support. So isn't that the measure of, you know, we've done a great job? And the answer is not always, because, you know, if we don't hear from customers, maybe they've just checked out. My point is, we have to have a very confident measure and understanding of whether customers are truly successful.
And one of the things that I look at is it's always moving the product out of the way to get the value. Essentially, is some of the goals that I have set up. We want to get it out of the way so that customers can get to the value that they need. Jerry in the comments also said that he's looking at time to resolution and CSAT and SLA adherence and things, but time to value is also one of those ones that's key for, at least on the success side. Also very important. I'm curious in terms of, obviously we're talking about measuring customer value and we're talking about the goals that they have and the goals that they connect. How do we connect the team's activities? I'm a rep. I'm doing my day-to-day tasks. I don't necessarily worry if I have the man on the moon mindset. I'm on it. And in terms of the activities that I'm doing and contributing, how is my leader actually going to show that what I'm doing to the business is valuable, and how can we connect that interaction up?
Yeah, let me start the dialogue on that question by saying it starts at the individual level, correct? So while we definitely, dashboards and success should be measured at the team level, you win as a team, but there are individual contributors that will contribute to the success of the team. And in your team, you will have different people with different strengths, and that's why you should also work as a team. But at individual level, I tell folks there are certain activities that have proven, and I'd love to have a debate on this, that ties to a larger business outcome we are talking about. One of them, in my opinion, is speedy response. But that itself can be a fluff. It could be generated like, hey, I got your case. That's not enough. But speedy response with some good content is really important. So as an individual contributor, I want to deliver a good response, fast response that has some meat on it. that the customers will go like, "Hey, this is good." Versus like I see sometimes customers complain on the CSAT, the rep sent me 4 or 5 articles that had nothing to do with my case. Yeah, while we responded to that chat in 10 seconds, that didn't help. So you need to strike a balance between those two. So quality as well as fast response is what I would say reps can focus on to help towards that higher level goal.
You know, so sending stuff, providing information through a knowledge base or in a community, doesn't necessarily answer the question for the customer to remove the obstacle. What do you say, Neil, to move the product out of the way, basically get the customer the outcome they want? That's what we don't tend to measure as enough of. So when we send something to the customer, when we get a CSAT survey back, what's missing from that is what was the nature of the need? Why did that need exist? What did we do to satisfy it? And what could we do in the future to actually prevent it from being needed in the future? We ran a study in our last benchmark, and we looked at the most effective ways that companies can improve customer satisfaction and deliver better outcomes. And the number one thing that, from the customer's perspective, that a company could do to improve, basically to improve their perception of a product or a brand, was to actually make the product better. Yeah. Fix the problems so I don't need to call for support. Surprisingly, the other thing was give me the skills, give me the tools to actually use and apply. And of course, there's always usability type improvements. And these are responsibilities, I believe, for any team that interacts with a customer, that we need to be taking the time not to give the answer and then rush on to the next thing. We need to savor the moment when we have a customer who's telling us, I have a need, and learning from that need so that we can actually then flow that into our product development processes, whatever it is that can make it easier for customers to do business with us. That's where we get long-term benefit. And support needs to be rewarded for that activity, not penalized. So
I remember one of the first times that we spoke on this topic specifically, you said support needs to build that relationship with product and engineering to be able to start driving those outcomes. And the biggest thing you said that they could do when they go knock on the door is bring data and really focus on building that relationship on data-based decisions and have that backing for them as well. I'm curious from anyone watching as well, what types of data they're collecting or how you're starting to measure this. One of the things that I start doing is to have a field or a question and get people in the habit of asking, what would have prevented this ticket in the first place? And then start answering that and bring that data and information to the teams as well. But Emre, you're going to mention something as well, and maybe the audience can answer well.
Similar to what you just said, and when we get an escalated case or a low CSAT, we ask the question in a growth mindset perspective. Why did this happen? Is the first question we ask. And what can we do to prevent a similar task next time? And we don't tie that to any punishment, or we just do it from a growth mindset perspective. And I also want to touch on the relationship with R&D. There are a couple key departments at SaaS organizations. Product development is key because customers buy the product. Sellers sell the value. Sellers sell the opportunity, what problems they could solve. But the product is what really they are using, hands on the keyboard. And in order to improve the customer experience, like if you go to a chiropractor, like they could help you and improve your adjustment, but the problem will come back if you don't fix the root cause. So R&D is the root cause, not from a bad perspective, but that's where you need to go to fix the root cause. You could give the customers the workarounds, the good service. Customers will be happy, but they will come back to you next week saying, hey, I'm still hurting, or I'm still running into this problem. And it doesn't have to be obvious defects with the software. It could be usability issues they keep running into and calling to you. So you need to, as a support leader, you need to establish a relationship, a program, whether you call it a voice of the customer or top case drivers, and provide that type of data back to them and help them prioritize. So that's it's counterintuitive to tell your support team we should lower the case volume, because they go, hey, if you lower the case volume, you don't need me to answer the phone, correct? There's counterintuitive relationship there. But again, motivate your team. The focus is the customer experience. And for customer experience, you need to have a solid product. And as a support organization, you need to be that voice of the customer.
I don't think it's a bad message to send to, to the team that, and of course you put this more delicately, but it's not a bad thing if we put support out of business as a reactive, break fix kind of an organization. We don't want to be in that business. We want to be in the business of helping our customers deliver value. And if they can get more value faster from our products, what does that mean? It means we're likely to keep them longer. It means that we're likely to provide, figure out opportunities to expand that relationship. So I'm not trying to suggest that, support should or is in the business of things that have direct, tangible financial impact, but they do. That's what we want. We want our customers to stick around longer and buy more from us. And we need to figure out if the efforts that we're taking, whether it's faster resolution or better answers, if that's what it takes, great. But that's the connection to what really matters to the executive leadership team.
I want to chime in as an audience now. But so one of the things I always tell, each case is unique, right? There are different complexities of a case. How should we take that into account when we measure the success of the team? Because certain cases are more impactful. If you solve that case, customers going to appreciate. Or some cases are a lot more difficult. So of course, it's going to take longer to solve that case versus an easy login case. So when it comes to complexity and impact of a case, as leaders, do we capture that? And Tom, wondering from your perspective, how do you advise the leaders do you advise them to capture the complexity and the difficulty of the cases?
Yeah, so the complexity of a case, the complexity is not just in an individual case. It is in, I tend to extract it to, an account. Are we talking about individual customers, one customer using one product, or one individual using a product that may be, administering a product that transcends multiple different users? And so the complexity escalates as more and more people are involved and more, higher dollar amount. So, solving an issue that is preventing a company from achieving an outcome. I don't know if you've ever had to say this to somebody, up the food chain, or whether you've ever heard somebody say this, but no, I'm sorry, we can't support that new thing because the product that we're running on doesn't have that capability, or we haven't implemented it yet, or technology shouldn't be an inhibitor, yet it is. And we, as the service teams, should be removing all of those inhibitors to our customers' innovation. One more thing that rolls into this concept of prioritization. Has anyone ever heard from the renewal team or the sales team that we can't close this new business because we have 40 open cases because the customer can't do boom, 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 boom? That's how you begin to see tangible prioritization of issues that are affecting the customer's business. We need to have visibility into that, and we have to respond and act on those activities first.
Yeah.
So I think I know the answer to my own question here, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In that scenario that you give with the renewal and the sales team saying, hey, this customer won't buy or they won't renew because they can't do this, this, and this, and this. And obviously, relationships are going to be extremely important to build. But how do you think that service teams specifically can contribute to that if it is something that the technology won't be able to offer? Or how can the support team actually contribute to a positive outcome in that scenario?
Support team is the early warning radar. It's looking over the horizon, and seeing and anticipating what customers need and the issues that they're having and the challenges they face. And when we don't have that ability to see with clarity what's happening in accounts, who do we have to blame? It's not sales, account management that's going to have that technical insight. It's the support team that is predominantly going to have that insight. Now, maybe the success team. So it depends where the account management and the real account relationship exists. But I guess what I'm saying is that it comes back to this one thing. We need the data to have that insight about the health of the relationship we have with our customers. And only through that insight can we actually make decisions about what more we can do to mitigate that from ever being oh my God, red alert, we're going to lose $1 million deal if we don't solve this tomorrow. So.
Nice. And I think that being that early radar and that early, having that look on the horizon, what Emre says about being the voice of the customer, being able to raise those insights back into the teams, and what you say, being able to have an indicator on that. I'm curious about measuring the metrics in terms of leading versus lagging metrics, because obviously if you look at CSAT, if you look at NPS, it's things that happen after the fact, after that experience has happened. How can teams, or what can teams measure to really start looking at leading versus lagging and looking more towards that horizon aspect than just towards, hey, this happened, this is how it's going?
Yeah, so this is where early on I was alluded to CSAT comes in at the tail end of the interaction, correct? So even lagging from that perspective, what we need to get to, and with the large language models we can do that, is in real time measuring the input. It is possible customers come to us with negative sentiment. That's just normal. But what I want to see if that customer sentiment is changing into positive direction after that first email, second email. So if I start measuring the real-time metrics that way, then I could know if it is trending in the right direction. So even taken to individual contributor level, we should be able to measure that now.
Service teams, support teams in particular are really good at measuring what's happened, the lagging indicators, the facts. This is what we've done. These are the results we got. It's harder to look over, for the future. Leading, lagging. Not a fan of the lagging. Sounds like it's a bad thing. It's not. It just tells you what you've done. The leading's the hard part. What do you do that's going to be predictive? That's going to tell you what's going to happen. And I've been looking at some leading indicators that might be interesting. Like, for example, rates of formal onboarding, rates of adoption milestone attainment. These types of indicators are predictive because they suggest that customers are going to be better equipped to use and apply the product. Customers trained and certified. These, again, equipping the customers to have the resources and tracking things that will be, have downstream impact are the kinds of things we can start to get our arms around. It's not an exhaustive list, but there are a lot of things that we can put into our scorecards that might give us a better sense about what does next month, next quarter, or next year look like if we do these or take these actions and see these trends.
I really like the point about adoption in terms of, if you are having a SaaS organization or something where it is account based, you need them to activate their accounts and get started in a good way within a certain period. being able to show you have maybe 5% 5% onboarding and adoption. How can we get that up? Is there some friction there? How can we actually start to measure it? I like the real-time sentiment analysis. I would say a slightly more complex implementation there. Is there any easy wins that you think that people could start measuring within the week, or something that they could do in a smaller lift to start looking a little bit more forward? Something very actionable in that sense?
What first things I would do, actually focus on the people side, because if you hire the right people, you give them the right tools, they are more likely to take care of things. So as a leadership, that should be one of your primary tasks. You need to motivate them. So what I like to do is people survey. You could survey, break it into 2 parts, and I'd be happy to share how I run the surveys and later on too, so people have questions they could start asking. One is people assessing their leadership. In most of the organizations, employee churn happens because they are not happy with their leadership. You could also ask questions around efficiencies and effectiveness, the tools they use. So basically asking people their opinion of what you think is right. And then obviously make it anonymous, make it simple so you could get the feedback. I do that every 6 months. Of course, nothing replaces in-person interactions, but having a formal survey method gives you that opportunity to see if you are trending in the right direction, especially if you are remote teams. You need to keep the pulse on your teams closely. So that's one of the things I recommend people, like, do surveys and measure how your people are thinking about your organization and about your leadership. And do they have the trust? Do they feel empowered to ask questions? Do they feel like they make a difference? And see what your team thinks about that.
If I were to recommend an immediate course of action, I would look to build, if you don't have one, a health index, something that aggregates multiple inputs that gives you an indication of how that relationship with your customer is going. Now, this is not just the support team's obligation. This is not a success team alone. I mean, this is a shared responsibility, but support has to contribute to this. And part of what I would love to see is that for all of the transactional surveys that go out, we start collecting more information about the nature of the interaction we had with the customer. So we don't just ask them, hey, did I solve your problem and were you happy? Why don't we ask them a little bit more about what the problem was, or connect it back to the case record that tells us what the problem was, and maybe ask them to, did this allow you to successfully accomplish the goal you had? Just again, I think we need more data, and we shouldn't be afraid to ask for it. I know that the response is typically, our customers don't really respond to CSAT surveys as it is, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't ask. And second, I think most everybody here is sitting on a pile of intelligence that needs to be mined and extracted. Emre, clearly you guys are on the path to make that happen. And so with that knowledge, we need to think of what are the indicators that tell us, do we have healthy relationships with our customers, and what more could we do to make them even stronger and resilient?
No, I love that. And I think it's going into a nice actionable direction, especially for people who are looking to get started in a sense. When it comes to this leading versus lagging and what we're starting to measure in terms of customer value, of building a health index, which is a multi-team contribution in terms of what does good mean for our customer and how are we contributing to that? How can we really make them successful? I'm going to prompt with a question, and I'd love to hear maybe the same direction that we're going in. How can teams start to assess where they're at in that journey now, and start to look at, okay, where should I actually take those next steps? Is there something that you think that teams could do to say, hey, this is actually where I'm at right now, and that's where I want to be? How can they assess that current state? Is there any dimensions or anything there that you think they could measure on?
Yeah, this week I'm actually doing this exercise with my support leadership. We are working on setting our second half year objective key results, and we open up with the question, what are the problems or what gets in the way of our success? So I would say that's how you could start assessing. Ask your team what's getting in the way of success, and maybe your teams will list different problems. As we are customer support leaders, what do? We solve problems. So the first thing to solve a problem is to understand the problem. And then if you have 5, 10 problems, then prioritization exercise, just like, when you have 20 cases in your backlog, what do? Case prioritization. So we are really good at those two. So why don't we ask our leaders, like, what are the problems you face and can you prioritize that? And that should lead to the next steps, which would be, okay, what's the outcome you want to get to? So definitely have a metric tied to that. But that would be my recommendation as assessing their maturity level, asking that question.
Maturity, I think, correlates directly to data and insight. You either have it or you don't. No, I don't know what's going on. Well, you're trailing versus leading. But here's something I just want to throw out there, because it blows me away every time I think about this. But this may not be true for everybody on the phone. Emre, we haven't talked about this, but one stat that kind of intrigues me is that for most companies, the vast majority, and I'm talking 70-80% of revenue comes from existing customers versus net new. So I think looking at that pool of revenue and that opportunity for expansion and growth, you have to look at, hey, are we losing customers? I mean, churn is got to be one of the biggest indicators of Houston, we have a problem. And it's either downsell or outright just, attrition. They're gone. And, if you're tracking high levels of churn, there's probably something that you're missing, or somebody's missing somewhere. And the answer is in the interactions with your customers. So I don't think there's any better place to start than to say, what do we really know about our customers? And why is it that we're okay with losing 10% of them quarter over quarter or year over year? Because that's a lot of revenue. And again, I hate to, I'm always sensitive to the fact that, people who are interacting with customers shouldn't be thinking about dollars and cents. But when we're thinking about building teams, asking for investment, mitigating, questions about, hey, can we do more with less? It always comes down to dollars and cents. So if we're not talking that language, then we're basically saying, hey, we're doing great over here. Yeah. Show me the money. So I hate to say it, but we need to be in touch with how we are impacting the things that really matter at the next level up.
Yeah, let me chime. Churn is really important, especially for SaaS companies. And different levels of customers will have different dependencies on customer support. But what I notice is lack of customer engagement is the first sign to churn. If your customers stop caring, which will lead to actually no cases into customer support. Oftentimes, if you, let's say customer left and you call them and say, hey, what happened? They may say something along the lines, I kept calling support, but I gave up. I wasn't getting responses. I stopped calling. So if the moment they stop calling, the data looks actually pretty good. If you measure the traditional metrics, correct? Time to resolution is great. CSAT is great because there's no data. Lack of data is also indication for churn. So I just wanted to caution the people to look into that a little bit closely.
Emre, but my contact rate is going to be amazing.
No, that actually is so, it's so spot on because for every support leader that I've contacted, had conversations with, no one's sitting there saying, "Oh yeah, we're just waiting for the phone to ring." They're busy, always busy. But what does that represent? Is that 5% of your customer base ringing the phone? I keep saying ringing. It just goes back to back to my legacy where we actually did tech support by phone. I know it's primitive, but lack of demand is not a good thing, and demand is a completely different animal. So we have to be measuring all engagement, and the variety of that is or the majority of that's probably going to be digital engagement. And sometimes it frustrates me that there's not enough visibility into how many times somebody's been up in the community, somebody's been in the knowledge base, somebody's touched us digitally, and we have no way of knowing.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's an interesting topic I want to explore next. This is such a good, that digital support can be a good thing, but also if not done right, can be a bad support model.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to
say, go ahead.
You mentioned the term deflection a while back. I love deflection, but I hate it.
Yeah.
Before it was deflection, we used to call it call avoidance. I mean, that's even worse. Deflection is a good metric, but it's also we want more interaction with our customers, not less. Exactly. But it has to be meaningful interaction.
I had a recent conversation with Rolf from Dology, and he said we were talking about ticket prevention and deflection, and the big difference there between them. And deflection is obviously not having customers contact us and just not getting them in the first place. And then prevention is asking that question that we talked about at the very beginning of what would have prevented this in the first place and fixing that core problem. Where deflection can be useful if done right and can bring value if done right. Fine line, I think, in some experiences. But prevention and really solving those core needs and educating people on how to use your product upfront, whether that's through a self-service help center, knowledge base, anything like that, can definitely be very interesting. I love what Emre says about, if people stop contacting you and this digital activity and engagement stops, it's a big indicator. If, for example, contact rate is something that you're measuring, which teams have been talking about measuring for a very, very long time in a scaling business, especially, measure your contact rate. If you see a big spike in that drop of, hey, we're not getting any contacts, that can also be a very big indicator of an issue or problem that you want to look into.
Yeah, contact rate and point of contact is definitely something to consider for the health index. Flatlining, or are you hearing from people? Are they active? Do they have a pulse? For certain vendors, architecturally, it's pretty easy to sort of see whether there's activity happening and whether people are using products. But there's still a whole lot of on-prem disconnected products out there where there's no visibility, no easy way to have a pulse. But
yeah. Indeed. I'm really curious. We're almost an hour in here, which I think has been a very fruitful discussion and starting the engagement and conversations. I'm wondering for those people who are watching, if they have any questions that we can answer directly or live, if they have anything there as well. So please let us know, and we can answer them for sure. Just leave them in the chat, and yeah, we'll keep that conversation going. As people do that. And they're moving forward from there, and we can answer some of those. I'd like to ask the question while we go: what are some of the benefits that teams can get when you do start seeing this connection between teams and these business outcomes? What are the benefits, and what are you seeing the fruits of that labor?
For me, again, seeing that big picture for our frontline staff is really important, because if you put yourself in their shoes and you're dealing with problem after problem, that job can be daunting and could take a toll on you. But if you tie your role into a more positive outcome, then you could see more opportunities, you could see more positivity. So it will lead into healthy employee relationships. So to me, tying that, I go back to tying back to employees. So to me, that's one of the first reasons that comes to my mind.
Well, you know, I guess I'm thinking that I'm trying to put myself into thinking about a conversation with the executive leadership team when we're having a discussion about whether I'm going to get 1 or 2% of net revenue invested in my support team, and being able to shift that conversation from, do I get this arbitrary amount, or can I tell you what I need and what I'm going to give you in return for that investment you're making in my organization? And I'd love to have that conversation to be able and to be able to say, did you know I took 100,000 customer interactions last year, 57% of them actually did this, 27% of them did this, boom, 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 to actually have facts to say, this is the value I delivered to the company. Not, we had a 92% CSAT, our average time to resolution was blah, 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 our TTR was this, and those are fine metrics, but they don't get me the money I need to make an investment in my team to deliver more value to the rest of the organization.
Especially when you connect those outcomes to those financial outcomes in a sense as well, and when you really start to take a look at that and be able to connect those together and say, hey, we're actually, especially if you're looking at revenue churn and growth and sustainability, you can connect those as well. What you say, every interaction is essentially a dollar amount, and that can be a whole conversation within itself. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for the discussion. I don't see any questions coming in terms of really being able to look at it. David saying loves prevention versus deflection and how we're overcoming some of those challenges, whether they be explicit or implicit as well. Any final thoughts to wrap things up, or anything that you would want to leave anybody with here?
Just the fact that we always talk as leaders to invest in the people. As leaders, we also need to invest in ourselves, like learning how others do, challenging our status quo, learning maybe something new. So continue to challenge yourself to learn more, and that's how you could help your organizations too. So that's my departing thoughts on the topic.
My thoughts are sort of the reason why we decided to have this discussion is that there is a lot of discussion on LinkedIn forums, on support driven and other communities where people are talking about what to measure and why to measure. And so this is something we've been talking about for frankly decades, and we're not done yet. We have at our disposal just immense opportunities with new tooling and technologies. I'm thinking large language models that can help us finally parse, massive amounts of unstructured text and actually derive meaning from it. We're really at the earliest stages of being able to tackle this problem. And I would encourage everyone listening, don't settle for your dashboards that you have today, because they can be optimized and better. And you can actually, with work, you can demonstrate and actually quantify the value of your organization, which unfortunately, I think for many, is undervalued. So let's just keep rolling forward.
Wonderful. I love it. Thank you so much for joining Tom and Emre and starting the discussion and recommending that we have it in the first place and really sparking it. We did start this conversation in support driven there. If you want to join us, we can always connect and be able to keep that conversation going. And as Tom mentioned, the ball rolling. For outside of support driven or anything, Emre, Tom, can people connect with you and keep that conversation going as well?
Yeah, LinkedIn, definitely reach out to me on the LinkedIn. and definitely love to have conversations on this topic and many other support operational topics.
Yeah, and an open invitation to everyone. This, I don't intend this as a plug, but we have a whole lot of resources that are available for free, open source, open domain. Hopefully you would find them useful. They're up on our site, servicexrg.com. If you have questions, reach out. But, I think, Neil, you Emre, and I, if I can be so bold, moving this industry forward is as much passion as it is, it's not our day job. It's what we want to accomplish. So, if I'm not wrong.
Oh, I love it. That's one of the things why I started Grow Support in the first place, to help give people the resources to be able to do that and create a space for it as well. If you enjoyed, it's plug time, I guess, right? If you enjoyed this conversation and you want the resources there, it will be recorded, and there are also many tools and other conversations as well on Grow Support that we can keep facilitating, and hopefully we can keep that going. Thank you so much for joining, everyone, and really appreciate it. And have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, morning, wherever you're at.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Everyone.